guys? Welcome to another episode of the MMA-holes podcast. With me, your host, Shane, joined as always by my co-host, Logan. Actually not joined by this week. Logan had a couple family matters to take care to, so he's here with us in spirit. And we will honor him by doing the podcast as he would have wanted. Because that's really what Logan would have wanted. So first up, first bit of news, Mark Hunt versus Justin Willis, up-and-coming heavyweight in the UFC, has been booked for UFC Adelaide, December 1st, which is headlined by Hunt's training partner, Tai Tuivasa, who will take on Junior Dos Santos on that date. In another bit of news, Tyson Pedro has also been booked on that date, and that's another friend of Ty and Mark's. It's actually Ty's brother-in-law. Tyson Pedro will be taking on Mauricio Shogun Rua after he comes back off that devastating knockout from Anthony Smith that he received, and I believe it was UFC Hamburg back in July. Mark Hunt taking on Justin Willis. I said this a couple weeks ago. I said Justin Willis would have been a good option to Logan. And then last week, we obviously talked about the tweets that Gokhan Saki had sent out regarding fighting Hunt at heavyweight. And I liked that option, too. I thought it was a great way to send Mark off. What better way to send off an old K1 vet than having him take on another old kickboxing veteran, especially since it suits Mark's style of fighting. It's not you're sending him there with another grappler. You're having him take someone on at what he does best. It will be Mark's last fight with the UFC, and this will probably be the last time we see him in the UFC, considering his history with the UFC over the last year or so with his lawsuit. But I think it's a great fight. Justin Willis, heavyset guy, a lot like Mark, athletic, former football player. I believe his last fight was against Chase Sherman, and that came out to a unanimous decision win for him. It's hard. Picks his shots really well. A lot of power in both hands. A lot like Hunt, actually. Very patient with his shots as well, and very dynamic with his striking. So I like that fight. And then Tyson Pedro versus Shogun Rua. We saw Tyson. Tyson's an interesting case because we saw him. It seems like he is that top 15, but not quite top 10 guy. You can see him take on guys like anyone who's not in the under the top 10 or lower. He seems to be able to beat and manage. And yet, whenever the last two times at least, he's been given a test in Ilir Latifi previously, and then more recently in Ovince St. Preux. Both are super tough challenges to take on. But get down from there. Sorry, the cat's meowing. Both are super tough challenges to take on. OSP is super explosive, has a great submission game too. And Latifi is one of the best in the division, as we've seen. So no shame there, but I'd like to see how he does against Shogun, especially since Shogun was on a roll before his knockout loss to Smith. I mean, this will really show us where Pedro is going to be, if he's ever going to enter the top 10. Where Shogun is, more than where Pedro is, actually, it's going to show us where Shogun is. He's getting up there, and, I mean, these will be the last. I don't know how many fights Shogun will have left. He's a very old vet. He's one of the last of that first generation of fighters that we have left. Vitor's left. All those guys are pretty much gone now. So he's one of the last remnants. Next up, Cowboy Cerrone had another close call with I believe it was a four-wheeler accident when he posted a picture on Instagram of himself in a cast and a black eye. And of course, selfishly, as UFC fans, we all went, oh no, his fight with Mike Perry is in jeopardy. Apparently, it's nothing to worry about. His fight with Mike Perry is still on. Although I don't know how he has a cast on and he's still fine to fight, but must not have been that serious. So his fight with Mike Perry in November is still on, which is good news because that's going to be a banger. But this is another close call after recently, and perhaps more dangerously, or pretty much certainly more dangerously, he has recounted a story about almost dying in a cave diving incident a couple months ago. So, maybe now that you have a kid, just relax, just a little. That's all I'll say on that. At least that fight with Mike Perry is still going on, which I'm really looking forward to. Next up, we got Nate Diaz and Dustin Poirier. This has dominated headlines this whole week. Nate Diaz and Dustin Poirier possibly fighting for the inaugural 165-pound light welterweight championship. That's just what I'm going to call it. I don't know what else. They might call it something else if they ever do it. But the light welterweight championship, according to Twitter, both guys, I can read exactly what they said. So it started with a tweet that Diaz put out that said, "I'll be fighting the main event November 3rd in NYC against Dustin Poirier for the first ever 165-pound belt super fighter division. I'm happy to be a part of history." And then Poirier responded with a tweet of his own that said, "It's been a long journey, but here we are. NYC, first ever 165-pound title in the UFC, hashtag there will be blood, hashtag thug jitsu." Dana White denies it, which doesn't tell us anything. Because the thing is this could be what's happening. This could be what's happening. We don't know. The thing is, we won't actually know what's going on with the MSG card until after UFC 229. Is it actually a mess where they just haven't ever been able to find a main event for this thing? And maybe the case is there was a rumor a while back they were trying to do GSP versus Anderson Silva. Maybe that was supposed to be for this card headlined. GSP didn't want to do it. They had to scramble to find a new fight. None of the fights were working out. And then maybe this is something they're considering. Apparently they also tried to put together Alexander Gustafsson versus Yoel Romero for the 205 interim title. And then apparently they also tried to put John Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson for the 205-pound interim title. Or title. I don't know. But, and Yoel Romero doesn't really make any sense because he was rumored to fight Costa, but he's still recovering. I believe his hand is still broken, or it's recovering. And he was supposed to fight Paulo Costa on that date and couldn't. So it'd be kind of weird if he could fight Gustafsson on that date. But anyways, it kind of looks like... I don't know what's going on here. Is Nate Diaz bullshitting? Is he just trying to bully his way into a 165-pound title? Or is Dana White lying? Dana White has denied it. He said, no way. None of that's true. Everything Dana's ever said wasn't going to happen has happened since then. He said there'd be no women in the UFC. He said Conor and Khabib, nothing had been figured out yet. Or we didn't have an announcement yet. And then, 30 minutes later at the end of that press conference, he showed a trailer for the fight. He'll lie right to your face. So, really nothing to figure out there. We don't know. if Dana wants a secret kept, he's not going to be one to spill the beans on that. So the more honest out of the two, I'd trust Nate, rather. I think there's something to this. Maybe there's not. I don't know. But I'd be curious to see what's going on with their MSG card. Is there some big mystery fight, or are they, and possibly what's more likely, are they just scrambling to fight a main event because they didn't get it figured out? It's not the first time they've had to scramble to put something together that they didn't have previously. But that's going to be a crazy fight anyways. The thing about the 165-pound division is there's a lot of fighters who have come out and said they could, potentially work into that division. A couple of them off the top of my head. Cowboy Cerrone said that would be his perfect division. Jorge Masvidal. A couple more guys could be. Rafael dos Anjos is an obvious one. Michael Chiesa, Kevin Lee, possibly even Colby Covington. He's not a heavy welterweight, so Covington could move down. And what do you do with welterweight? If 165 pounds is going to happen, I assume you have to move 100 or welterweight to 175 pounds. Is that the decision they decide to make? I don't know. I don't know if any of this is true. I'm of the belief that one day what we're going to see in the UFC is we're going to see, I don't know how many more women's divisions we get. I think just we're struggling to find featherweights as it is. So I think you see those 4 divisions for a while, but I think those 4 divisions are going to be super stacked. Probably the most stacked divisions in the UFC. Just because there's going to be a lot more female MMA fighters than we already have. And they'll only have 4 divisions to fit into, and that's also because, there's not as much variety in their forms as men typically. The women's divisions, in my opinion, currently are some of the most exciting divisions to watch. The flyweight division is very fascinating to me. I eventually think we'll see a 165-pound division pop up, and I think 170 will move to 175, and then I think we'll also get a 195 division, and then I think we'll see cruiserweight too at probably 225. But we need to get more talented heavyweights before we can create a 225-pound division, because true heavyweights, I mean, in the top 15, how many are true heavy? All of them are true heavyweights. But how many of them are big heavyweights that don't have to cut up any weight? I mean, let's go through real fast. Derek Lewis is probably a real one. Curtis Blades, Francis Ngannou. I mean, a lot of these guys, though, could easily cut down to 225. Stipe certainly could. Daniel's cut down to 205. I mean, he's the champ there. Overeem could probably cut to 225 easily. There's a ton of guys. So I'm certain that before they create a true or a cruiserweight division at 225, then they will continue to build their heavyweight division first, because that's already one of the least stacked divisions probably. I mean, you start at the top of the heavyweight division with Stipe and Daniel Cormier, and you end it with Stefan Struve and Justin Willis, which are both great fighters. Justin Willis is an up-and-comer, so we don't actually know where he's kind of different. We don't know where he places within the picture of that division. But there's a huge disparity. And outside of the top 15, even, who do we have? I mean, true heavyweights, Brock Lesnar's a true heavyweight. He cuts from 300 pounds. Francis Ngannou's, he's a little lighter now, but he was, when he fought Stipe, he was sitting at about 270. Those are true heavyweights. The ones that have to cut to make 265. Even just a little bit. Derek Lewis as well. But I'm excited to see those divisions, including the 195-pound division. And the thing is, when you add these divisions, suddenly what will happen? a ton of those 155ers are going to go to 165. You probably see Tony Ferguson go. Kevin Lee's certainly going to go. I mean, he has trouble making 155 as it is. Jorge Masvidal is going to come back down to 165. Rafael dos Anjos, Cowboy, Michael Chiesa. You probably see Paul Felder there. Bunch of these 155ers and 170ers, so it's going to shake up all the divisions, which I think is what Dana's probably afraid of. But I think it's ultimately a good thing, because then what happens? Because then what do we get? We get less extreme weight cuts. Then big featherweights like Max Holloway, Brian Ortega, they're able to move up to 155 where they actually probably should be. And then you get guys like the 135ers can come up to 145 where they're supposed to be. You know what I mean? Jeremy Stevens might come back up to 155. You know, there's a lot of things that are beneficial about not having to cut as much weight, and I think the best way to fix extreme weight cutting, and it's not going to fix it for everybody because there's going to be that one Darren Till in the group who's 215 and he's still going to try to cut to 170 or 175 rather. He's going to be 220 cut down to 175. There's the Rumble Johnsons out there, but we've seen it doesn't matter. It's skill based. It's skill based, and the only time a size advantage really matters is when you have the strength. What we're talking about when we talk about size is strength. And what happens is when you extremely diminish yourself and cut weight, you diminish that strength as well. So I think a lot, if you add more divisions, and I'd be very interested to see a 195-pound division. I think Yoel Romero fits in there. I think Whitaker probably stays at 185. Romero could move up to 195. Again, Romero will probably be long gone to the UFC by the time we get those divisions. But it's just an interesting thing to think about. But yeah, as for the MSG card, UFC 230, Alexander Gustafsson was rumored with Yoel Romero, and then Gus was rumored for John Jones, but apparently neither are happening. Apparently John Jones turned down the Gustafsson fight. I mean, it's only on a month's notice. If this is really true and they're scrambling to find something, the thing is I do think it hinged on a couple things. Conor and Khabib could have played a factor in the MSG card not having a headliner for some reason. GSP versus Anderson Silva, I think, was strongly considered, and I think, in fact, it was offered, and I think Anderson accepted, but GSP denied it. He didn't want that fight to take place. He didn't see any benefit from that, which is true, because I think when you look at that fight now, most people go, oh yeah, GSP will handle that. And apparently it was supposed to be like a catch weight at 180 pounds or something like that. 178 maybe. Which, that fight's, what, 5-6 years too late? But, I mean, I'd still be interested in seeing that fight, but that's, it's kind of like the fight, one of the fights we'll talk about later, Vanderlei versus Rampage 4. It's exciting. It's not so much on GSP's side because we've seen he still got it against Bisping, but Anderson, he's not the Anderson he was. Prime Anderson Silva versus prime GSP, which could very well be the GSP now. That's a fight I'd like to see. I'd watch Anderson versus GSP now, but I'd rather see Anderson versus Stylebender or something like that. Stylebender versus Anderson Silva was a very interesting fight. It's two very similar fighters, and that's the one I was rooting for before Stylebender was announced to fight Derek Brunson. So, another bit of news on the USADA front is their tests failed USADA tests will no longer be made public until after the fighter has had a chance to make a case for themselves. This is good. this is good progress, and the reason it's good progress is I don't know. The thing is there's been a lot of shady stuff going on with USADA recently. A lot of fighters are accusing them, especially because of the whole John Jones thing, and now it's coming out that he may have taken up a snitch policy. Some people are even saying that's a scapegoat. USADA or the UFC are using that to say, oh, the reason John Jones got cut off, got his suspension cut down early, is he utilized our snitch policy. That and some people are saying that's a smokescreen. He didn't actually utilize that. They're saying that so that they could get John Jones back earlier. I think it's good that fighters have a chance to make a case for themselves before public opinion can disintegrate a legacy. But also, I think, and this has happened with every administration that tries to drug test and keep a sport clean, eventually the fighters, the players evolve. And they get smarter and they know how to beat your tests. They just do. They're going to know how. They're going to know how to get around them. The John Jones thing is interesting because there's a lot of different theories of what happened. I mean, there's the theory, he says he doesn't know what happened, or that it was a tainted supplement. A lot of people have claimed tainted supplements. Yoel Romero claimed a tainted supplement. He was able to prove it, got off. Chad Mendez, Junior Dos Santos, Lil Nog, Anderson Silva. They're able to identify what they took and immediately test that and test all of them. They go into the store and they purchase all of them. They find it from the batch you got it from and they test all of them. And it can't just appear in that one. So the thing is, that's one theory. There's ways around that also. People are saying, and also another theory I've heard is John Jones with the whole cocaine thing, that he possibly did some cocaine and it was tainted with, or it was cut with creatine, because he's tested positive for cocaine before. So some people are saying maybe John Jones has a cocaine problem. Sorry. Maybe John Jones has a cocaine problem. He did some coke. It was cut with creatine. That creatine was created in a vat that was used to create steroids, specifically turinabol, which is what he tested positive for. USADA cleared him because it was in such a trace small amount that they said it would have no benefit on the athlete, and also he tested positive for the test they do after weigh-ins. So he tested positive for that specific test, and it wouldn't make any sense to do it right before, because all the previous tests he took were random drug tests. That was one of the only tests he took that he knew that's when he was going to take it. So why would he sabotage himself in that way? I'm kind of partial to, and some people are like, some people also, they look at certain performances John has, or behaviors. Chael Sonnen's one of them. He said, as someone who's used performance-enhancing drugs, he can get inside the mind of someone who does it, and the temptation it creates inside an athlete's mind, and also the dependency. John Jones is someone who shows characteristics of a dependent mindset on certain factors. He needs to feel safe with himself. He's admitted himself he would party the weekend before every fight, not train very hard, so that way he would have a built-in excuse if he lost as to why he lost. And he never did. But another thing people point out is the Ovince St. Preux fight, which most people call John Jones' worst performance, and his body looked different. So what people are saying is he came back, he got off the juice, he fought over in St. Preux, and then he said, "Oh, that was my worst performance. It felt different. I'm not doing that again." He tried going clean, and then he stopped. I'm impartial to the Victor Conti theory, and Victor Conti is probably the most notorious drug snitch of all time in that he was essentially a performance enhancing drug dealer, and what he would do is uh, some notable athletes are Barry Bonds. I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but pretty much everybody was getting their shit from Victor Conti because he was such a prolific steroid provider, and he was also one of the smartest in passing tests, and he could tell you how to pass tests, and he knew how their tests worked. His theory about John Jones in particular is that John Jones was using performance-enhancing drugs, but what he was doing is testosterone cycling. And in testosterone cycling, you cannot test for it essentially, or after a certain amount of time, it doesn't register. So he thinks that he was testosterone cycling, it was out of his system. However, the vial that the testosterone was in had a trace amount of turinabol in it, and that got into John Jones' system, and that is what triggered the test. I don't know. I think other athletes have said, that's great, but I've never had any problems. Daniel Cormier said he's been tested 70 times, maybe over 70 times, in the whole time he's been wrestling and fighting in the UFC. Never once has he failed a drug test. Michael Bisping said the same. He has no problems. He takes some supplements. He uses protein powder. He's never had this problem. I tend to kind of agree with them. I think we should be understanding. But I do tend to kind of agree with the fighters who never have problems with this stuff. And there's really no suspicion on them. And they don't understand. And some people might even use USADA's policy against it, where they're like, oh, I could take this supplement that I know has something in it that will benefit my performance. Maybe I'll pop on a test. Maybe I'll get a 15-month suspension. It's my first offense. Whatever. And then, and that's only a possibility. And then, it's a built-in get-out-of-jail-free card. Built-in deniability. Anyways. I think it's good. They're not announcing it to the public until after the fighter has had a chance to make a case for themselves. Overall, I think that's good. I think it's a good idea. All right. On to our Bellator 206 recap. Some really impressive fights, some that stood out. Carrie Melendez, the wife of Gilbert Melendez, fought on this card, and the first round's really fun, and then the whole fight was pretty fun, but towards in the third round, it just got into the same thing where her opponent was just trying to submit her. Zimmerman was just trying to not even submit her. She wasn't working a huge submission game by the end. She was just kind of holding on to her. In the beginning, she was trying to submit her constantly. The first and second rounds. In the third round, she was just kind of holding on to her, couldn't really do anything with her. And then Carrie Melendez, whenever she got free, was just lighting her up. She had a straight right hand. It was a thing of beauty, and she was just lighting this chick up. And it makes sense that she would want to hold on to her. Really fun, dynamic striking from Melendez. Like front kick to the face. I mean, her slashing elbows were beautiful. Her straight right hand is amazing. Really impressive striking. So, definitely a future female Bellator star in Carrie Melendez. And her name also being Gilbert Melendez's wife will help her get some notoriety, no doubt, with the hardcore MMA fans. Um, and then you had Aaron Pico. And Aaron Pico is really interesting because he is one of these first guys showing up. He's in the featherweight division. He's one of these first guys showing up where he's been training since he was a kid. He's been doing wrestling and boxing since he was a kid. Super talented guy. Trains with TJ Dillashaw. TJ says he's... And TJ is known as being super competitive. He says Aaron Pico is the most competitive guy he's ever met. Pico, his striking was just, you could see him getting a little bit of danger. Higo, the guy he fought, is a vet, and he's super talented guy, former title contender, and he's a really talented fighter, as you could see. Has a great submission game also. And it looked like he had some really heavy hands, and he was fast too. He almost caught Pico a couple times. But Aaron's boxing was just on point. I mean, his body shots that he works in too. A lot of times in the MMA world, we see a lot of body kicks, but we don't necessarily always see devastating body shots. Aaron has knocked out people with his body shot. The thing is, he's only 4 fights deep now, or rather, I think he's 5 fights deep now. He was 1-3, or 3-1 rather. He'd won 3, lost his debut in the first round to a submission, and then since then he's been on a tear towards the title. I mean, that's what it seems like. Aaron Pico TKO'd Higo. Higo tough as nails. Like Josh Thompson said, just too tough for his own good. He was out on his feet, and Pico was just beating his ass. Ton of power in those hands. Just every time he'd hit him, just devastating. But we look forward to continuing to watch Pico's continuing career as it progresses. I'd like to see him get a couple more fights before he gets a title shot. I mean, look, he's only 5 fights into his career, and he's lost 1 out of 4, or 1 out of 5. So he's lost 20% of his fights, which isn't, that's a hiccup. I'm sure maybe he'll never lose another fight, and that's fine. But I'd like to see him against 1 or 2 more talented guys just to see where he places. Just to see where he is in the picture of the featherweight division before we rush him into a title shot with the champ too fast. And we could get that. He could get that title shot in 2019. I think he probably will. But for now, I'd like to see him fight 1 or 2 more guys before he gets that shot. But don't get me wrong, I'd like to see him tested. Next up, we saw Andrei Koreshkov versus Douglas Lima in the first fight in the welterweight Grand Prix. This fight was it was interesting. It's their 3rd fight. This was actually Koreshkov versus Lima 3. Koreshkov won a unanimous decision over Lima the first time, and then Lima knocked him out in the 3rd round, their 2nd time. Lima finishes Koreshkov in a awesome 5th round submission by rear naked choke. I mean, it was amazing. But the fight itself was receiving a lot of boos, and that was mainly due to Koreshkov's game plan, which is just trying to get Lima to the ground. I think he may have gotten to the ground. I mean, they definitely went to the ground, but I think his wrestling attempts just weren't working the majority of the time when he was trying to work him against the cage. And anytime they were in a striking exchange, it was Lima getting the better of those exchanges. Even more and more so as the fight progressed. I mean, and Lima was just picking away at that lead leg. Every time Koreshkov would even switch, he just kept hitting it, and Lima has devastating power. So um, Lima capped off that trilogy. Koreshkov, tough as nails, didn't tap, went to sleep. Um, but Lima got the better of that, and I picked Lima to win that fight. By the way, guys, we would have predicted these fights last weekend, but I forgot. I forgot these fights were even happening, so that's my bad. I'll try to be a little more professional in the future. Um, and we already did the UFC 229 prediction, so we won't have to do those this week. Um, but yeah, Lima advances in the Bellator welterweight Grand Prix, which is one of the most exciting things going on in MMA right now. Bellator is doing it right. I mean, look, Bellator, people are saying, fighters are getting paid 2, sometimes 3 times as much as they were getting paid in the UFC. People don't really seem to have a problem that much with Scott Coker. I mean, everyone seems to have a problem with Dana White. I think the more you can pay the fighters, the better. And I think stinginess. I understand running a business, but if you're going to be stingy, I don't appreciate that. As a fan too, as somebody who enjoys the sport and wants to see the fighters get paid, and that's the only way you continue to build the sport. And make no mistake, Eddie Alvarez, Cody Garbrandt, people speaking out on fighter pay, or there's a lot more. Those are just a couple that came off the top of my head. But people speaking out on fighter pay, that is going to get better. And that's going to help too, speaking out. The problem is, the thing that's actually going to change things is Bellator. Because Bellator is going to keep putting on better and better shows. They're going to create better and better working conditions for the fighters. They're going to pay them better and better. And the UFC is going to have to compete with someone, finally. And they're going to start losing their best fighters. And now you're going to see more competitive contract negotiations. So that's exciting. And I'm glad for that. And this whole card was fun. Just super fun. I mean, one of the most fun cards I've watched all year. But anyways, next up, Vanderlei Silva versus Quinton Rampage Jackson 4. By the way, can somebody talk to Bellator about their entrances? I get they're trying to do a whole pride thing, and I really like the gloves, actually. I like how they're red and blue. They're more colorful. I dig that. I dig the octagon being a circle. I think that's cool. But their walkouts, Vanderlei Silva's walkout was so fucking cheesy. I mean, Jesus Christ. Looked like Vince McMahon put that thing together. I mean, this shit, it looked like The Undertaker was about to walk out into that octagon. I mean, I even dig the fucking Pride style red carpet down to the fucking octagon, but can we make it a little less cheesy? Can we work on that a little bit? I mean, jeez, that made me gag. Rampage's wasn't as bad, but it's still like, come on, can we just have him walk out of a tunnel? Can we just be real for a second? It's not the WWE. That said, I like the other stuff they're doing. It's clearly inspired a lot by the way the Japanese do it. And I think Scott Coker himself has even said that. But Silva versus Rampage 4, I wasn't dying to see this fight, but, and I'm never dying to see guys like the whole Chuck Tito fight that's happening right now, Chuck Tito 3. I'm not interested in seeing that. The thing that's being put on by Golden Boy Promotions, I'm not interested in seeing that shit. I won't buy it. I won't watch it. Silva versus Rampage 4 was fun. It was a lot of fun. I mean, what can you expect? Silva, by the way, Silva looks like a chimp with mange. That's what Vanderlei Silva looks like. And he looks like a fucking orc. But he still got it, man. I mean, he doesn't totally still have it, but he's still got a lot of power in his hands. Still has a great jaw. I mean, his jaw is held up. But Vanderlei Silva, Hall of Fame, MMA Hall of Fame, obviously one of the first names in there. Um, Rampage finished it by TKO in the second round. I had Rampage finishing this fight. Thought it would be in the first round. Pretty much all the people I thought were going to win the fights won the fights. I picked Karen Melendez. I picked Aaron Pico. I picked Lima. And I picked Rampage. But this was a really exciting fight because it could end at any moment. Vanderlei was kind of edging around. And Rampage, I mean, it was at heavyweight technically. Rampage doesn't look that bad. He's 40. He looks about 32 to 35. Although, for sure, shave the afro off your shoulders. I mean, he's got his chest and his back waxed, and he's got this coat of fucking hair. It took me like 2 minutes to figure out what was going on his shoulders. I didn't know. So for sure, shave your shoulders, Rampage. But Rampage looks about 35. Silva looks like he's 60 years old. And he's only 2 years older than Rampage. Anyways, Rampage stops it in the second round. A lot of respect between the two after the fact, considering how much shit they talked and how much, I don't know how much that was promotion, how much they actually hate each other, and how much it was, a Conor-Nate thing where Nate genuinely doesn't like Conor, but, they're willing to hug it out and stuff after the fight because they're so relieved, from all those endorphins after the fight. I was glad to see Rampage get the win, even up the score. I don't know if we ever see a fifth fight. I kind of doubt it. I mean, I wouldn't put anything past Bellator, but I kind of doubt. We don't really need to see a fifth fight out of these two guys. I mean, I don't know if we ever even see Vanderlei fight again. We probably see Rampage fight a couple more times, maybe, but I don't know if we ever see Vanderlei fight again. I don't need to. And I would say the same thing to Chuck Liddell. I don't need to see him fight anymore. All his best work is in the past. But anyways. And then moving on to our main event, champion versus champion. Rory McDonald, the welterweight champion, takes on Gegard Mousasi, the middleweight champion, for the middleweight title. And I was going back and forth on this. I was going initially, all up until this week, I was thinking Mousasi was gonna knock Rory out in the first or second rounds, and then as it progressed this week, I was like, well, I like Rory. I like the craziness. I think he's a genuine psychopath. The Canadian Psycho. For sure, change your name from the Red King to the Canadian Psycho. But I like Rory's attitude. He's the kind of dude who tries to do bare knuckle boxing amidst his Bellator MMA career. And so Mousasi versus McDonald. I kind of thought McDonald can implement his game plan, but that's also a product of the same thing that happens to Mousasi seemingly every time by fans. He gets overlooked. I mean, Mousasi's fought really tough competitors. Let's look at Mousasi's record real fast. Gegard Mousasi. Let's look at that record real fast. I mean, let's look at all the guys. He's on a win streak right now. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fight win streak. His last loss was a TKO to Uriah Hall back in 2015, and he avenged that loss in 2016, a year later. So, Thales Letes, he won. Thiago Santos, he knocked out. Vitor Belfort, TKO'd. Uriah Hall, TKO'd. Chris Weidman, TKO'd. Alexander Shlemenko, decision. Rafael Carvalho, TKO. Rory McDonald, TKO. I mean, and as Chael pointed out, like 5 of these guys are former champions. Oh, Dan Henderson back here, TKO'd. A lot of these guys on his record are former champions, and some of them are upcoming title contenders in other divisions. Ilir Latifi won a decision over. Ovince St. Preux won a decision over. I mean, submission of Mark Hunt, KO of Jacare, submission Melvin Manhoof. Just a really impressive record. And as Chael Sonnen pointed out, a lot of these guys are former champions. Dan Henderson, Vitor Belfort, Chris Weidman, Rafael Carvalho, Rory McDonald. Either current champions or former champions he's beaten. So Rory McDonald remains the welterweight champion. I look forward to seeing him return to welterweight and participate in the welterweight Grand Prix. But the thing here is, and it was pointed out too, is Musasi's kind of good at everything Rory's good at, and sometimes better. The only thing that Musasi's probably not as good at is his submissions game's really strong, but his takedown attempts, or rather his takedown defense, he's had some problems there in the past, and Rory's wrestling is very good. So that was the one chink in the armor, but Rory just couldn't seem to really close that distance without getting punished. He even clipped Musasi with a couple of good shots in the first round, but when it got into that second round, Musasi just took over and punished him. So I'm really excited to see the fights that jump off from there. I'm excited to see Musasi face whoever he faces next. I'm excited to see McDonald face John Fitch and participate in the welterweight Grand Prix. And now we move on. That brings us to our next segment, matchmaking. Aaron Pico, who by the way is our MVP of the night, or MVP of the week. I'd like to see Aaron Pico take on Daniel Weichel, who's actually challenged for the title. I think it's a big test, but I think it's a good test for Aaron Pico. And I think it's deserving because either one of two things are going to happen. Clearly, if you keep putting up against guys that, I mean, this guy was a test. Higo. So he's performed well under the tough tests. So you got to move him up. You can't keep him at the same level, and you can't push him down lower. So against lower competition. So he's got to fight somebody above him. Daniel Weichel, former title contender, yeah, I think Pico wins that fight as well. But I'd like to see Pico test a couple more times, like I said. For his opponent, Leandro Higo, really talented guy. He could face John Teixeira. I'm not super familiar with the Bellator featherweight division, but just thinking of guys I know, John Teixeira, I think is on a little bit of a losing streak. And that would be a really interesting fight. Lima, Lima is already going to take on somebody. Since he moves on to the welterweight Grand Prix, he already has his opponent picked out in the winner of Michael Venom Page versus Paul Daly. Michael Venom Page versus Douglas Lima would be an amazing fight. I really want to see that happen. My first MVP's got to beat Paul Daly. As for Koreshkov, I'd like to see him take on Lorenz Larkin. Lorenz is currently matched up with Eric Silva, but I do want to see that fight take place. Excuse me. And Rampage, if he fights again, I'd like to see him fight Tyrell Fortune. I think Rampage will probably fight again. I'd like to see him fight Tyrell Fortune, who is a heavyweight. I'd like to see Rampage continue at heavyweight. And let me look up Tyrell's record real fast. I just had it. He's an up-and-comer. Really exciting guy. And you could use him to either move up Tyrell or just have a really, really exciting fight with two really hard-hitting heavyweights. Let me look up his record real fast. Yeah, undefeated, 5 wins, 3 by TKO, 2 by decision, and that would be a really exciting fight. Young guy, um, only 28. Yeah, that's a fight I'd like to see. And then for Vanderlei, I don't know. I don't know if I want to see Vanderlei fight again. I guess if you, I don't see, the thing is, I don't really know if you can have Vanderlei continue to fight at heavyweight, other than Rampage. But if I'm gonna put him with someone at heavyweight, I'd like to see him versus Czech Congo. That's who I'll put him against. And then Rory McDonald already has a dance partner in John Fitch in the welterweight Grand Prix. That's going to be a fun fight. And then for Gegard Mousasi, he mentioned Rafael Lovato, and that is a fight I'd like to see. Let me look up Lovato real fast. Rafael Lovato. Yeah, that's who I want to see him face next. And then after the fact, should Machida beat Carvalho, I want to see a rematch between those two, between the winners of those fights. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this episode of the MMA-holes podcast. Sorry for such a short episode this week, but we'll be back next week to recap the events of UFC 229 and do predictions for Chael Sonnen versus Fedor Emelianenko, that card, and then also the Mitrione versus Bader card. See you again next week. Bye.